So welcome to the 8th edition of Ukrainian Feminist Kitchen. Today we are going to talk about building practical solidarity in a framework of collective care. We have a bit more people speaking today than usually. We have Yosh, feminist activist from Ukraine, ex-head of Feminist Workshop. We have Alla coordinator in Feminist Workshop. We have Schiavone, activist from Làbas, from Bologna. And we have Antonella Amadei, activist from Municipio Sociale, Làbas, Italy. My name is Marija Jakovljević, and I will be moderating today's session. As many of you know, it is quite flexible format. We will try to discuss many different dimensions, many different questions, but of course you are free to step in and share your thoughts, questions, concerns. You can do it in several ways. You can type in the chat as discussion is going. You can join the discussion when we open the floor for everybody. In the meantime, we are also going to have an artistic work. We have Viktoriia Chernyakhivska, our amazing artist, who will share a bit what we are going to learn to draw today.
We will start with Easter, and it will be I will talk about Orthodox Easter, because in Ukraine it is like the most widely celebrated. So Easter in Ukrainian Великдень, it can be translated as a great day, big day. Well, I've read that even before Christianity, it was already was a holiday connected to equinox, to spring, everything is awakening. And with Christianity, it became, of course, it is about resurrection of Christ. So in Ukraine, on this day, people say not usual hello, good afternoon. They say Christos Voskres. That means Christ is risen. And the answer is voistino voskres, truly risen, truly resurrected. And it's a very big holiday, very sunny, very happy day. And people also have a lot of tasty food, and they gather this food into baskets and go to church before Easter. And my idea for today, while listening to the main discussion, to serious topics, you can, on a background, you can take a paper, pen, pencil, anything, and what you draw. What is the proposal? First, you draw a basket, to add things in it. Then you draw this Easter cake. I will tell more about all these things later in the next parts. So we draw Easter cakes, and also willow branches we will draw, and some beautiful eggs that are named pisanki, krashanki, and we will add everything in this basket, so we will get a kind of Easter postcard. That's all. You may start drawing and listening to the main discussion, and I will draw too.
Thank you so much, Viktoriia. I would like to invite Yosh to firstly to ground us in this session and in this topic, and to share what collective care would mean for you, because approach to collective care emphasizes different dimensions in different contexts. There are, of course, dimensions that are common, like focus on personal, communal, societal, or environmental well-being, with aspects like decent living and working conditions, attentions to need of diverse bodies and minds, attention to interpersonal relations, how we relate to each other, how we hold space for each other, how we show up for mutual support, how we demonstrate solidarity in practice, and so on. But collective care should also mean working on painful processes in transformative and healing way, It can also mean mindfully engaging with sticky questions, with things that are ambivalent, also with our own traumas, with some harmful patterns that we all bring into the space because we grew up in oppressive systems, and by definition, we reproduce them. So learning, tackling that, and unlearning is also part of collective care. And there are so many other things that we discussed in the preparation for this session. So having all that said, what in your opinion would be mindful way to approach these challenges, and how you envision collective care from your standing point?
Hello, I want to firstly say one thing about Easter. For me, it's not religious holiday, because like I'm not religion person, and my family is also quite not atheistic. But for me, it's something that is really connected to the question of collective care, maybe because it is something, it is common tradition in our society, and sometimes it is similar. I would say that in Ukraine it is similar to the Christmas, and me personally, I don't say all these words to welcome people about Christ's resurrection, but still I sometimes enjoy this, the whole atmosphere and the symbols around this celebration. So yeah, I think like atheists also can enjoy drawing these symbols, putting their own meanings in that. And yeah, I also want to mention that it is our last feminist kitchen, and for this time I decided to join the discussion for myself, because previously I was initiator and curator for this project, and I only were searching for other people to invite, and this time I decided to share a bit of my experience and my reflections, and also later I will share some thoughts about the format of Ukrainian Feminist Kitchen and how it is really connected to our today's topic. But before, I want to start with thoughts about self-care and collective care. And in my opinion, it is not always possible to do this simultaneously because it's quite different things. And for example, I understand when person says like, I don't have mental capacities for this, for example, for understanding a war somewhere in other country. And it's quite popular in our feminist bubble to say, to hear such things, or and I know that it's becoming a mainstream culture in Western countries to take care about ourselves, like to say, I'm caring about my resources, I'm overwhelmed, I have my shit to do, I don't have time for other things. And at the same time, individual self-care practices very easily can be commodified, and they really are. And this logic slowly draws us into this imaginary individualistic world where you can be all right without others, and without people who can take care of you for free without money, and you can pay back them in non-monetary way. And when we speak about collective processes, first of all, we acknowledge the value of some collective. Either it is our activist collective, or our friends, or family, or community of our neighborhood, or in broader context, our nation. And we need an idea of belonging to this collective, obviously. Therefore, when we think about time and energy we need to use for the sake of this collective, we understand that this effort has a name to save our common resources. So it's not just about wasting our resources. And in case of big-scale problems, for example, like climate change or genocide in the center of Europe, that neighboring countries in NATO are paralyzed to stop, people have to think themselves in a broader context. Where is my community on this scale of this crisis? Do I belong to people who are supporting aggressor, or do I belong to people who will lose when aggressor wins? So, and I think to practice this collective care, we don't need to not forget about collective interdependencies, and this will motivate us to practice collective care. But I think the biggest problem here is that we can endlessly speak about methods and best practices, you know, of collective care, and many theories and books written about this. But many people still don't do a bare minimum, and I would call this bare minimum such thing as platforming vulnerable, protesting against oppressor, or fight against discrimination, and disrupt economies of aggressor, things like that. And lastly, I want to give you one example. It's from my personal experience, and I think we can learn something from Russian activists. It is a lesson what you shouldn't do in this case. So in 2021, I attended online course on philosophy of nature. It was done by Russian academics and Russian activists, and they provided us students with top-notch theory. We read the newest publications from Western academia, and including the colonial perspective, you know. We read and discussed all this, and I was so excited about this course. And back to the days, I also followed some Russian feminist activists, but I didn't recognize that they had already given up by the time. Neither had they, because they failed because they were useless to help to fight in this situation when Russian government, with the help of Russian and support of Russian citizens, started full-scale invasion. They just simply didn't know what to do. They asked us Ukrainians what to do, and their great decolonial theories didn't help them. And you know why? I think because they stopped to do this elementary practice years before invasion. So they lost this ability to do very basic things for collective care, I would say, such as fight against aggressive government. But at the same time, apparently, they continued to do these big theories, to write dissertations, to do all these things, reproducing the image of activism, of doing everything that good, educated people would do in Europe, for example. But their activism was not relevant. So I would say that it's important to stay connected to reality in your activism. Thank you.
Thank you, Yosh. So I will invite Alla, also from Ukraine, to tell us a bit about yourself, your background, where you're coming from, and also to share your insight in terms of building solidarity between feminists and leftists. I know that you are working on that domain. So what would you say that are critical blind spots in both feminist and leftist movement, to build on what Yosh opened up, and how we can work to overcome those?
Thank you. So my name is Alla. I'm coming from Ukraine, from Kyiv, and I'm a feminist and work in the Feminist Workshop, but also I'm an educator and I'm working with kids who are suffering from war, suffering not only educational lost access to the education, but also who are now currently in the occupied territories or were forced to leave Ukraine. So we provide them education from Ukrainian schools, but also psychological support. So I guess my work is connected to these two big communities of the educators and kids and the feminist community, where I try to practice what I would talk about, and the girls also, I believe, would develop on it more. And to come to your question, I guess my answer is really connected to what Yosh already opened up about this idea that there is some theory which is nurtured in the society of the academics and the activists and all these workshops and panels where these ideas are discussed, but then when the reality is struck you in the head, then you see that these theories do not simply work and you do not understand what you were doing all these years. So in a feminist workshop, and also me as an individual, I try to speak with a Western left and a Western feminist to build in the beginning, from the beginning of the full-scale invasion, the connection, and expected big solidarity. And I guess the biggest blind spot in this was to hope on this solidarity and to believe that this solidarity exists and that we don't need to build it, since feminist and the left movements, it's something which in the course of itself, with all the theories which are built around, supposed to have a huge empathy, give agency to the oppressed people, give them the voice, amplify their voices, give them all the necessary support. They are the ones from whom you would seek it in the theory. But in reality, what we saw and what I saw personally in my experience is they failed. And what we saw also in the reality is that they probably show more the attitudes of our enemies. I don't want to call them an enemies, not at all, but what I would try to say is that they reproduce something what we would wait from the other side, that the ignorance, silencing, instrumentalization of Ukrainians, the total blindness to what is happening. It was from the conversation, like what they could know about what is happening to them. Like if we think about the manifesto of Western feminists, which was published in the very beginning, or the peace conferences without the Ukrainians and feminist peace conferences without the Ukrainian women and their voices, and the obsession about the US and other questions where Ukrainians were not just present, they were not asked. So that's what we faced and what I faced. And I guess living through the full-scale invasion, having every day a constant grief, and going through the enormous level of pain, and at the same moment being rejected by the people from whom you would seek help, bringing you to the not to the best settings to build the solidarity between the movements. And I guess the problem to it is that unfortunately the Western movements, Western left and the Western feminists probably didn't go through this practical curation of themselves, that these are people who are coming from some specific historical settings, very often also imperial settings, in which they managed to build the theory, but didn't manage to build the practical ways how to rediscover themselves, rediscover this history, to question themselves, how to overpass all these constructs, which is bringing them to the pattern which we see now, the silencing, the rejection, and so on. And I believe, and what is working for now is that people from the Western left and Western feminists who are not blind to it, who are seeing that is themselves that the Western left are going through the big crisis now, the big value crisis, and who are ready with us to question their privileges, question their past, question how they were seeing this theoretical world, and are ready to build the practical solutions with us. This is the ones with whom we are starting to work together and trying to build a solidarity between Ukrainian movement and the Western one. And I guess Ukrainian Feminist Kitchen is one of the places like this where we could talk, where we could listen, and where we could have a dialogue. And I hope in the future, with the help of people who already went through this self-rediscovering and self-curation, we could bring more and more people to the step to come from the theory to the practice and come to the inner questioning and self-rediscovering and realization.
Thank you, Alla, for putting all these questions to the table, and also the matter of privileges, and I would also say question of accessibility to different conversation spaces, networks. So, I mean, we also need to acknowledge that most of us, if not all here, are white people, mostly able-bodied, so we all need to work on so many different levels, and as you are saying, on international level, we fail to show up properly for each other. So let's, for beginning, start to look into community level, like what's happening there. And we have Laura and Antonella, and I will first invite Laura. They are engaged around housing issues from feminist perspective. So my question here would be, what does collective care look at the level of community, and how it relates, in your opinion, to global level? Like how you make a connection between local and global, level of community and level of system of global relations. How system actually influence communities, and how work on communal level can contribute to systemic change, at least in indirect way, and what is the role of care in all of that. So I know that you want to talk about new care-based models, so the floor is yours.
Hello. So yes, my name is Laura. I really liked both of the speeches that were right before me, and as I always like to take notes, I was writing down in very, very big words, collective interdependency and the idea that we belong to different communities. So I would say, as in the presentation, the community that I really identify with is that of Làbas and Municipio Sociale, which is a reality in Bologna. So I come from a different background. And I also really resonate a lot with the idea of not staying on the abstract level. I think one of the things that really changed my mind, that has been said by one of the members of this community, is you have to see in order to know. So you cannot just stay on the abstract level. You need to actually engage and see in practice. And I think that in spaces like Làbas, but also other spaces that are related to it, what we really try to do is to create practices and projects and projectualities that allow to work around collective care in a way that is actually collective. Well, hopefully that's the idea, actually collective, and not strictly individualistic. But I also think that the question of how do we relate to the collectivity has two different interpretations. At least to me, I have two different images in mind. So on the one hand, I have the idea of creating networks with realities that are similar or resonate with us, but that come from different contexts, so you can exchange perspective and understand better. And I think we use the word internationalism for it, but more practically, it is what we are doing right now, I think, by meeting together and discussing on concepts that are fundamental. And it is also what has led me to meet some of the amazing people that are here. So I think this is very positive. But on the other hand, there is the system as the power dynamics, power structures that are different in different locations and with which you have to interact. And I think it's very important for us to stress that you have to interact with that, because a tendency of these extreme idealistic positions is to just ignore it and create some sort of happy bubbles where to live and find refuge, which is okay. I think it's an important part because it's also part of self-care. But on the long run, it can also, if it's only that, it does not lead to collective care because you stay limited in your area. So really, I think what we like to use as a practice of collective care is to imagine, create, and test what we might call new models for care. So we rely a lot on projectuality in different areas, for example, in education, health, freedom of movement, learning a language, and well, for different aspects. And we try to test how they can work and constantly make them better. And I think that what's the role of care in that is basically care is the key concept in how we think all of these projects, and it really determines what goes inside and what goes outside of it. So, for example, if we think about education, we really want mental health to be a fundamental part of education. But on the other hand, we want to avoid things like hyperperformativity or overstress or sexism in education. So when we build projects, we try to make sure that no hyperperformativity is in there. And for example, that mental health is well valued. So we create these projects, but then the problem obviously becomes how do we bring them outside? Because as long as they work inside of a space, it's okay, but then you have to have them interact with reality. And I think that's very complicated. Like for me personally, I would say the best way is experimenting really, because what might work in one place and at one time might not work in another place and at another time. And I also really don't like the idea to just follow one practice as a religion. So what we try to do is always to put these practices to the test in different situations. And if they don't work, we just sit down, talk about it again, and see what we can do better. And we really want to do it in a collective way. And yeah, I also wanted to say that these two levels that I've mentioned, the networking and the interacting with society, I think they are very well related, because like when we talk of models, we really are very much inspired by all the exchanges that we have with other realities working in other contexts. Obviously, it's very hard to translate from one context to the other, and we should not do it blindly because it's impossible. But these moments of confrontations are key. So yeah, now that's all I really had to say about it. So thank you.
Thank you so much for guiding us to the practical level. Though my background is in social theory, so I will forever defend social science, but I totally agree that we also need to put that theory into practice. Otherwise, like, we fail as humans and the societies. So that leads me to the question of mutual support mechanisms that I want to invite Antonella to talk a bit, because for me, when we talk about mutual support mechanisms, they are operationalization of the values of collective care. They are how we put our theory into practice and our politics into practice. So what does mutual support actually mean for you? How do you envision it? Do you have some examples from your work to share with us, like from your activism? And please share a bit about yourself and your background, and then go to the question. Thank you.
So, hi, and I am Antonella from Municipio Sociale Làbas. About mutual support mechanism, the thing is, I think that what is interesting about mutual support is it that it does not simply makes up for the shortcomings of the present, but it allows us to create the foundation for building the future. Because it both helps us to put in practice our political principles, and also to stay in touch with the material reality we are fighting for. And I like that interdependency came out in this discourse many times, because I think that mutual support really starts from the recognition of interdependence. And, the fight for autonomy that realizes that autonomy is not independence, but relies in interdependence. And working on community building. I think that by practicing mutual support, we really make our political struggle legitimate. We keep in touch with what we are fighting for and the people we are fighting for it with, and to build the struggle together. It's based on reciprocity, and what is core of mutual support is not imposed on the receiver, but it's built together, and it's not based on charity. In our organization, we have many examples of mutual support mechanisms. We always had projects based on mutual support, but our focus on it intensified a lot during the COVID pandemic. It allows us to operate with different parts of society, and it allowed us to do it during the pandemic, where everything seemed to stay still, but actually the harsh was growing. And it helped us keep building those alternative models that Laura mentioned before, and to share responsibility of mutual care. And it directly involves the people that one solidarizes with in building it. So this is like what is really caring, and what really allows change through mutual support, I think. We in our organization, we have many projects and examples of this approach. We have a medical lab that operates on mental support, on dental care and gynecologist healthcare. And people that come in our medical lab are usually people that do not have access to the institutional healthcare because they do not have the documents, for instance, or students and people that in general seek a safe space and an accessible space. We also have an Italian school for migrants, a social trade union that acts both on work and on housing issues, and a legal desk that supports people who are trying to get their documents, their residency permit. And also every Saturday we have a project that is called AIR, which stands for Autonomy, Inclusion and Resistance, where we have we offer showers and washing machines to people that are currently without a house, and then we have lunch together. Maybe I'd like to explain the role of mutual support with an example. I'd like to share the story of one of our comrades. With his permission, he allowed us to share his story in different contexts. We met him during a project that we call the Staffette Solidali, which is a project that we had during the COVID pandemic, where activists went around the city to share our mutual support projects that we have in our space, and to better understand and collect needs and perspective from people that lived on the street. And he crossed many of our projects from the medical lab to the legal desk, and he's now one of our comrades. He's in good health and he works with us. We fight together to build an alternative. So I think this is a practical example of what mutual support can be. And also I think that another way of practicing mutual support, and this maybe comes from also my background of practice in the fight for the housing struggle, is also house squatting, because I think we did this 3 times in the last 2 years, and some of the people that we met that needed housing then found a place and then started practicing this to fight for the housing right for other people and to help other people, support other people without a home. And I think this is also an example of mutual support. because there you can practice solidarity, you live within the reality you are fighting for, and you collectively build the political struggle. I think mutual support mechanisms are a fundamental way of reimagining and practicing care, and to practice organization starting from care. Like, I think it's not a self-sufficient tool, but it's a precious one. So that's it.
When I was preparing this idea what to draw, I thought that we will do colorful, we will cut, we will make these baskets. But then I sat here, and I also have just a pen, and I don't want colors. I mean, if you have inspiration right now, if you're inspired, you may draw anything, not even full basket. You may draw what you want and add this picture, this drawing to the chat. And anyway, everything will be then connected into one collage. The idea was to draw this Easter cake, Pascha, this eggs, pisanki, krashenki, and willow, because they are the most usual symbols. And a few words about this Pascha, Easter cake. It is made of, like, it must be made of airy dough, if I say this word right, like tisto. Very airy, and when it is cooked, it rises too, and it's very good if this pasta grows high. It means that, like, and family will be happy, and like, while people are cooking them, everybody in the house should be silent, like, not make a big, like, not make loud sounds, not like interrupt anyone, or people are trying to be very polite. Like, it's very, very important moment of this cooking. And also it is added a lot of eggs inside, and then this cake looks yellow like the sun, like it's one of ideas about sun and everything. So you may, if you use colors in your drawing, you may draw Pascha yellow. That's all.
I'll invite Alla to share a bit more specific about collective care in the context of war and conflict, because it is completely different setting. And from our experience, it is often partial or even misused, as already mentioned. Like, there's a lot of buzzwords around it, but when it comes to practice and real impact, well, it gets questionable. So I'd like to know, like, with your experience of war, what do you, with your structural position, with all your identities, what is that you need as a person, as a human being, to feel supported? And what kind of collective care you want to see and experience? What things that people claiming to stand in solidarity with you should pay attention to? You start a bit to unpack this topic, but I would like us to go a bit further.
Yeah, I would maybe I would like to start how the collective care is for me in Ukraine and with Ukrainian people. I prepared my answer more for the Western part and so on, but after this conversation about the Easter, and it makes me feel like I want to share something positive and something which brings more light. So I guess now in Ukrainian society in general, it's still non-homogeneous. There are a lot of different communities, but what is common for all of them, that people goes through the normal level of pain and loss. And I guess usually people are not educated. They do not know how to deal with it, how to deal with their inner pain, how to deal with the pain of others, and what to do if somebody is going through loss. If you ever lost somebody in your life, you know all this awkward silence when you appear in the room and people do not know how to address it or how to talk about the person whom you lost. I guess now it's the common situation to the majority, to the vast majority of Ukrainians. And this loss is not only a loss of a person. However, it's also the case, and it's a very painful and dramatic experience, but also it's a loss of home, it's a loss of the perspectives of the future, and so on. So, and all these experiences are different for the unique person. So that's the complication is coming from how to address it with all these differences and all this pain inside you and inside others. my answer for now is I try to constantly to rely on what I went through, on my personal experience, and try to do not be afraid of the states, and to try to do not be afraid of the people who are in the painful, uncomfortable, complicated situation. For example, one of my close friends recently, she lost her husband at the war, and immediately she became a ghost for everyone around, because that is just too scary to approach her. You don't know what to say, you don't know how to say. If you say something, you immediately see that it's wrong. And in one moment, I remembered my story, and that this feeling when you want to share a story about your loved one and there's nobody to laugh with you about, because everybody got stressed and sad. So the little example of a mutual care in that moment, it was that we were sitting together and remembering how her husband was a bad husband in some silly moments, and how they were fighting and then laughing, and that she had the chance to remember that she's still human, and that I see her, I recognize her pain, and she could share this pain. And I guess this approach could work in different combinations for all these traumas which our Ukrainians are experiencing now. The same we are doing with the kids. We are listening them, and we are allowing them, to the degree which they are ready to share with us, to share their stories. When they are scared, we are laughing with them on this fear, or we are crying with them, or supporting them in their feelings. And to come back to the part of the international solidarity and which kind of collective care, maybe me personally, and I believe it would be useful to show to other Ukrainians, from people from the West and other countries, from the international community. It's the same approach, to recognize that in front of you is a human, to recognize that this human is not only a part of some political debate, of some discussion. It's a human who is now living through the full-scale invasion, who's living through the genocide, and for whom all these words and cities and names are not just the news, are not just reason to debate. I guess I'm getting a bit vague. What I'm trying to say is that from my personal experience, very often we have this conversation with Western colleagues, and I feel that there is space for me as a person with whom we could discuss, as a person with whom we could go again to the theory, but I'm not a person with a real life experience who are going through something and have a pain and have a personal story inside this. So I guess this is important to address in the communication during the wartime with the international community. And also I believe that from that moment when the understanding that the Ukrainians with whom they communicate is not only people who are experiencing something which is again went to the debate and the political discussions, it's the people with their histories. I believe that the idea of Ukrainian resistance and the Ukrainian story also will become more personal and more human, because you would see it from the different angle.
Thank you so much. I know that Yosh also has some reflections on this level, particularly in relation to broader European community. So please, floor is yours.
Yeah, I in this context, I want to flip the question and want to share my approach to show collective care towards international community and our friends who are abroad and who don't experience this particular war. And I want to uncover a bit of idea of Ukrainian Feminist Kitchen, because there are indeed many approaches which I took from my previous years of activism behind this seemingly simple format. But I did my homework before this event, and I sat down and wrote down all these principles to give you very concrete examples. So we started this format of Ukrainian Feminist Kitchen almost a year ago, And back to that time, I shared the feelings of disappointment, disbelief, and even anger against all the citizens of those countries with whom we had previously good connections and agreements to protect Ukraine, but their governments refused to do this, and the citizens of these countries also did little. And how do I know that they did little? Is that I check the news every day and I see news about new people that are dead, and including civilians in Ukraine. And this evaluation of effectiveness of this work very obvious. But I thought that if I know some people abroad who do care and who are looking for some methods for this fight, I can help them. There is no reason for me to attack them. And moreover, I thought that it is sometimes also can be connected to self-care, because it's a practice of self-care for myself if I show kindness towards other people. So, firstly, we invited people to speak as equals in this format. Yeah, of course, we constantly repeat to each other in our bubble that we cannot recognize people who are not experiencing the war as equals. They are much more privileged. But being placed in this shared Zoom room for 2 hours, we feel ourselves as equal participants of this event, of this particular event, and moreover, it gives us a good experience that we really can sit and talk, we can hear each other, and we can cooperate, even if it is only some very small format. And I also think that it is something important, maybe not very very important and crucial, but it's important that the moderator for this format is also not from our organization, so it's like somebody who is more neutral. So in this way, we organize a situation when we can speak and share our really different experiences. And so the gesture of caring here is that I devote my time just for listening to and recognizing these other struggles and this context, and I recognize that other people in other countries also have complex contexts. And I care about this, even if it doesn't bring some immediate results, and I continue to read this news with people who are dying and dying. And I also take responsibility to spread this information about their context and their struggles. And while doing this, we give a signal to our subscribers of Feminist Workshop that it is something valuable, it is something that worth to be seen and heard and shared. Secondly, when we organize the discussion, we ask our guests what it is really important for them to share, opposite to approach when you just pick up an expert on concrete certain topics that fit to your agenda and ask them to repeat their thesis. And then after the event, while we have this recording, and we publish this recording, before publishing the recording, I ask people if they want to cut out something from their speeches, because maybe it's again just a gesture, because people eventually are prepared to speak publicly, but still it is how I show my respect and give them opportunity to exercise their will and to change something. And finally, the fact that we publish this recording on YouTube is about making an archive. So these voices will live sometimes after the event, and perhaps and maybe after, even after our death, and maybe even some other generations of activists or our collective scale can build something on it if they want. So it was very concrete examples of collective care from my side.
Thank you so much. I think it is extremely important to dive into practical ways how to actually demonstrate care by having these spaces, because sometimes people do not pay enough attention to different dimensions, and I really like how you described each step of it. And as it was mentioned, like having this experience of war shapes people completely differently in so many different levels. So I don't want to move quickly from that point. So I just want to circle back more and go a bit even further with Alla on that matter, because one of the obvious issues is related to how we deal with the traumas, especially when it comes to people who were in the army, for example, who were on the front. And in Serbia, for example, we had this experience of feminist movement mostly not working with men. There were very few initiatives in Serbia, across former Yugoslavia, and so on. And it spilled over. Like you have still high level of domestic violence and all other form of violence, just name it, we have it, and so many harmful patterns. So there is a real need to deal with anger, pain, and all those things that are being left untreated. And it will inevitably spill all over social spheres in different forms of violence, misogyny, ableism, nationalism, racism, homophobia, xenophobia, whatever. So we often have this situation of working with only one group of people, and there is this imposed competition to whom to work with, to whom to spend resources on, and what are the priorities, what are causes, consequences, and so on. So I'm curious, Alla, to learn, like, what would be your angle on working with people who were at war?
I think for Ukrainian context, it is important also to know that in Ukrainian army we have a lot of women. So after the war would be finished, and even now there are a lot of women and men who are equally coming back from the front line. And personally now, and me and our organization, we are not working with the war veterans, nor women nor men. We don't give them any direct help, but I believe that, at least for myself in the future, and the principle with which I want to live, is that the people who went to the front line, they took some responsibility, some civil responsibility for the society where they decided to do it. A huge part of our army, it's not actually the regular army, it's the people who were civils, and they choose to go to the front line to defend the country and to defend us from the invasion. So I also believe that for the people who were in the rear, it's our responsibility how these people will come back and how they would be socialized and accepted back. And of course, I guess there will be a huge problem of bringing them as physically, because simply our cities are not prepared for people who will come with the war traumas like amputations and so on. To be again included to the city, you need to be mobile in the city. So it's first thing. Then all the other problems with the administration work, with the finding a job and so on. But I guess from what I see now from other projects that Ukrainians are aware about it. Our civil society is working on it. We have different projects like Veteran Hub, which is working with the families of the war veterans and with war veterans themselves. They try to not only provide them juridical help and medical help for rehabilitation, but also psychological support to find a job, how to open your business and so on. Something where after the war is finished for you, you won't be in this void of traumatic memories and traumatic past of this experience which cut at your life, but you could try to find something else. So I believe that these projects, they would grow and grow, and now it's very resonating with what we were talking before about the community part and the mutual support in the community. I guess it would play a crucial role, because government and I don't know, institutions, they cannot take care, and probably they won't take care. Let's be realistic about all the people who are coming back. So it's our responsibility on the community level to see the people who are coming back, to see their needs, and to propose them help. And I guess propose them help also on that way that we see them as equal humans to us, we propose them help, and we show them the ways how they could also contribute. So like this, we could again be equal to each other, again to play some role to each other's lives. And I believe, yeah, as I said already, that there will be more projects as this. I guess also it's very positive sign that before the full-scale invasion, there were already projects also from the veteran movement, of the veteran businesses which were opened in Ukraine. They were Ukrainian women veteran movement, which was working on the women rights in the army, but also rehabilitation of the women in this sphere. And the feminist movements are working, and the women rights defender movements are working to help the women who would suffer also, unfortunately, from the soldiers who came and commit domestic violence. But again, to add some salty spoon in this beautiful future of support and self-aid, I should say that for any trauma, for anything what happened to you, you need peace. For example, if you broke your arm, to do not break your arm fully, you need to stabilize it. You don't need to move it anymore. And the same is with the society. There will be no recovery for as civils, as people who are coming from the front line until there is war, because there's just simply no any space for the mental and the physical recovery. The infrastructure which is built would be destroyed. The people would again and again go to the front and come back or do not come back from it, and it would be a constant circle. So the first step is to show our solidarity to Ukrainian resistance. I guess meanwhile prepares the ground for the better future where these people could find themselves back in the society. I'm quite positive that maybe it won't be a perfect pink glasses world, but I believe that civil society in Ukraine is mature enough to provide some essential help to these people and to do not leave them alone.
About eggs. Now it's from the internet we can see this West things like rabbit hunt eggs, this egg hunt. In Ukraine we had no these things like rabbits for Easter, but there were is the most important like eggs писанки. They had more sacral meaning, and they were empty, and they were drawn with using wax, like with different colors. They also had their meaning. The egg was, while drawing, it was divided in different parts, for example, and every this dividing had its meaning. For example, if an egg was divided into parts in picture, it meant two parts of the world, like sky and earth. If it was in drawing divided in three parts, it meant like sky, ground, underground. If it was divided into four parts, it meant east, west, and other parts of our geography. If it was divided into 12 parts, it meant 4 seasons and months. So people drawing, they were taking inside a lot of meaning. And that's why in chat there was one picture for the symbols, and among the most usual symbols there was sun in different circles with different rays, everything. This. And about krashanki, another kind of eggs, they were not empty as писанки. They were usual eggs, boiled, and people could eat them. And just krashanki, they were painted with plants, not as a piece of art, just as a thing to eat later. And for example, there was a game, and there is a game, it's usual in my family too. It is named bitki, or egg tapping, when two people where are my eggs? I will show. Well, all Ukrainians know anyway, but I don't know if in other countries you have this. So, for example, two people, they both take their krashenki, like this are drawn, I mean krashenki, just color, boiled egg. And they try to like make a fight by these eggs, like one person keeps her egg, and another tries to kick this egg, and whose egg is broken, yes, that one loses, and this person with like a good egg plays more and more, and whose egg is not broken, that is the winner. So we have this thing, and everybody eats these eggs, and also it's always exchange of this krashenki among relatives, among all friends, like you have then refrigerator full of eggs from all your relatives.
Thank you so much. And I really love the name krashenki. For me, in Serbian, it resonates like something that you're crushing. Like we have a bit weird, even weirder word for that. Anyhow, thank you for this artistic and cultural intervention. And speaking of the culture, let's move to the level of political culture that I'd like to discuss with Antonella, because there are so many, like, we are talking about so many needs, but so many preconditions need to take place. And in some way, we also need to do a lot of work on ourselves and on the level of our collectives and our political organizing to deal with all this mess and to create something different. So in a sense that there are, I don't know, a gazillion things to learn and unlearn if we want to change our environment and relations, like how we make decisions, how we build capacity to understand with each other and to collaborate, as Yosh was, for example, talking about. All of us, like, we like to talk about democracy, and we will say that we are pro-democracy, but democracy can have so many different forms, so many different shapes, and it's not necessarily a solution per se. And if we enter decision-making process from the position of fear and anger, as Yosh was saying, if we enter in defensive mode without understanding the broader situation, but also without understanding our own limitations, and we go after wrong choices and set up harmful environment. And historically, that happened so many times, and so many authoritarian leaders and Nazi leaders and fascist leaders came into power in democratic ways. So there are a lot of examples that warn us that we need to be very cautious how we do democracy. So my question here would be, what is needed that our democratic processes and decision-making manifest and uphold collective care? Can you give us some reflection on this, and also to share an example of decision-making within Taiga project and what we can learn from it?
Yeah, so this is, I think this is a super relevant question, and not so easy to find an answer to this. Like how we take decision collectively is a huge part of political practices that I think requires constant effort and focus. Maybe what we should try revolves around responsibility, clear communication, trust in comrades and colleagues, balance between structure and flexibility, and also collective construction of moments of decision making. And like about this last part, like one very, very small example from our organization is the fact that we try to build together the agenda of our discussions, and we take turns in opening assemblies. Like for those who took part in the Taiga project, we had the opportunity to share with you how our organization works in terms of assemblies and decision making. For each of our projects, we have specific assemblies. We have a larger assembly for the whole collective of Làbas, and one bigger assembly for the whole political organization of Municipio Sociale that includes 2 more spaces where we discuss our political line. And this one is the assembly in which decision making is concretely given, and from which other assemblies originate discussions. Of course, one thing that makes this decision-making and democracy process harder is maybe the fact that there may be different roles and different levels of responsibility in an organization. And I think what is very relevant is that all members should work for the interest of the collectivity that we should, and we should trust our comrades or colleagues in order to do such. Of course, care is a huge part of trust building. We take inspiration a lot from the Kurdish theory of democratic confederalism, in which the relation between comrades, Havelti, is a core part. Havelti does not simply mean the relation between comrades. It's a lot farther than that. It would take a lot of time to talk about it, but it's like a form of love between comrades and toward the world one is fighting for. But I think that this kind of caring and trusting relationships between those who are part of the decision process is a key part of building truly collective decision-making process. And of course, clear communication is the core of this, is necessary in order to build all of this. Trust cannot exist if we do not tell each other what is working and what is not working. I would like to say especially what is not working and why decisions are being made in a certain way. Decision processes must be able to engage those who take part in decision moments in a way that is not like making people participate, forcing them to participate, but creating a situation where people can make themselves part of it because they are aware of what is happening and they truly feel part of it. And they chose to make themselves part of this process. About Taiga, I think I may have two examples to share. One is more about when we organized the appointments, like we realized that we were not self-sufficient, and we also knew that we wanted to encourage participation and mutual care. So we collectively decided that we wanted to try to have everyone engaged in taking care of the spaces and the moments. And so all participants took turns in taking care of the spaces, distributing meals, and so on. And this was this came from a collective decision. Also, one other thing that I think is a good example of this was a situation that happened during one of the workshops, where we found ourselves in a situation where the moment became very tense for many of the people involved because of how we built that moment and because of internal dynamics that happened. And there, I think we collectively managed to sit together, share what went wrong, find ways to decompress and take collective decisions on whether to go on and how to do it. And I think that was a moment that taught a lot about how to take decision collectively in a caring way.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate those practical examples, particularly part like discussing what's not working and how to hold space for each other to untangle that. So I'd like to invite Laura now, because you mentioned during our preparation that the governments in general are dismantling care systems, and also that they're creating stigma around asking for help. And I think we cannot just talk about community level without considering what's happening in a context, and what our governments are doing is our context. So you're also involved in creating safety spaces within the movement and experimenting with feminist care in difficult neighborhood. So there are levels of political organization, of neighborhood, of the state, but also the society. So can you elaborate on relations between these social levels and share a bit about your work and what do you think is needed to scale up these mechanisms that we briefly touched on of mutual support and care?
Yes, thank you again. I agree with Antonella. These are like the questions, the fundamental questions, I think, for us. And they are very complicated to answer. Well, for the level of organization, I totally agree with what Antonella said before. the need for transparency, involvement, trust. I also wanted to stress a lot the topic of trusting each other. So yes, as she also mentioned, we have 3 different spaces, and these 3 spaces are located in 3 different neighborhoods with very different features from each other. And I think that one of the tendencies, especially with this kind of political organizations in Italy, is to forget that they are situated, so they are located in a specific neighborhood, and that should really determine the way in which they act and the directions that they take and what they choose to do and what they do not choose to do. So just to, for example, if we take Làbas, which is the space I go to the most, it is located in the city center. So it's really at the heart of the university area. And if you look around from the building, you see an elementary school that's really attached to it, a high school that's also attached to it. And then there is, sharing a courtyard, there is this association of all the inhabitants of the neighborhood. And one thing that's really peculiar to this is that we try to really interact with the people that are surrounding us and to involve them in our decision-making process. So for example, because there is an elementary school, we are trying to develop this project of after school where the children can come, play in the courtyard in a safe space, do their homework together with us. And yeah, and we talk with their parents, we understand what are the needs. And the same goes with university. We have a university collective in that space. We also have the collective of the high school, and we usually create projects together. And one other very nice thing, in my opinion, is that we like to have lunch in the weekend with the members of the neighborhood. And then we have a assembly/meeting where we all, again, sit down in a circle and listen to what they think the needs of the neighborhood are, what do they need, and how can we work together to make everything a little bit better. So that's for the neighborhood, but Làbas is in one place. And for example, another space that is one of the 3 that Antonella mentioned is in another neighborhood. It's in the periphery of Bologna. It's near the airport. And it's a way more complicated neighborhood. And what works in Làbas doesn't necessarily work there. So this is very much a work in progress. We have just started finding ways to bring our support there as well. But for example, whereas Làbas has a medical permanent lab, we try to implement a mobile unit in offsite in the other neighborhood, and we try to have more discussions with the women living in that neighborhood by having, for example, feminist happy hours. So different tools for different places. As for the city and the system, that's even more complicated, because I think part of our flexibility is that we are actually trying to be also part of the administrative government of the city. So we like to think that we act on 2 levels. One is the grassroots activism, and that's what we do every day in our spaces. And then we try to be part of this, of the organization of the city, the administration of the city. But this is really complicated because I think the more you enlarge your action, the more you have to compromise. But the problem is that compromising often can lead to contradiction. So it's very hard to find that balance to be part and have an impact, but at the same time, not be swallowed up and lose your nature. So yeah, that is more of a complicated question than an answer, but I think it's really crucial to try to have an impact. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I mean, I know that all of these questions are, I mean, it's not possible for us to give definite responses, but I think what you're pointing out about different contexts, even on a small scale, like on the level of the city, is extremely important to understand like what we are dealing with and how to build different strategies and be agile to respond to different environments in different times. So thank you for sharing that. And finally, I would also like to hear from Antonella, because you mentioned some important things during preparation, that there you pointed out to the short term, like urgent feminist responses, and also long-term feminist aspirations in embedding collective care into our societies. So when I was initially speaking with Yosh, we realized that it might be difficult, and I think that I'll also mention that, to speak during the war or about collective care and healing when everything is burning. So we realized that there are different stages, like sustaining people during the war, then working on repair, on healing, then building collective care infrastructure, then further working on prevention, but also mechanisms to check up on ourselves, like to avoid becoming rigid or even to perpetrating what has been done to us, which happens so much time when all those traumatic things are not being processed in proper way. So what would be feminist approach to all that in the long run?
So I think that a feminist approach to this may follow two paths, probably. And one involves sharing responsibilities, and the other one is being able to criticize ourselves and each other's, mainly collectively, in a way that is properly constructive and caring. This means, first of all, that each one of us should somehow feel interested, responsible, and caring of all the things that we are working on. For instance, in our organization, we have, as mentioned before, different projects with different focus. And clearly, some of us carry out some projects specifically, but I think that we all feel engaged and responsible for everything we carry out as an organization. And this allows us not only to have an overall look, but also not to put this responsibility, or at least try not to, on just a few people. And so to share the energy, the ideas, and also the workload to be done. And in this, we must be able and learn to responsibilize each other in a caring way. One example may be, again, on how we choose to share responsibility during the Taiga appointments. And also this specific moment, actually, like, it's Laura and I that are speaking for our organization, but we try to build this participation together and resonate on what we were going to discuss collectively. So the responsibility was not just on me or on her, I think. And another example maybe is when some of us, of our comrades, 6 of us, got legal consequences for resisting an eviction, and they had to leave the town a few weeks ago. We all took care of this situation. We felt responsible on how to handle these consequences while keep fighting our daily struggles and projects. So no one was like left alone. On the other hand, I think trust comes up again, because we are collectively responsible for everything we carry on, but we cannot have direct control on everything. So we must trust that all of us will carry on what comes from our collective decisions. And on how not to perpetrate what has been done to us, I think here comes the role of collective criticism and collective self-criticism. Because not only we have tons of work to do daily, we also are inevitably influenced by power structures we live in. And in this sense, it's everyone's responsibility to take this into account and to point out when this happens, in order to make the collective a healthier organism. Criticism, self-criticism is a form of collective care. because by making each other and ourselves aware of what we are perpetrating, we take care of the collective processes we choose to be part of, and we take care of the individuals that are involved in it. In some way, this doubles the amount of work one has to do, because we are fighting to build a more caring world, and at the same time, we have always to check up internally. So it's not easy, but it's about inner liberation from power structures. So it's very it's a fundamental, precious part of a feminist approach to caring and to organization.
Thank you so much. It was so powerful, and I see your reaction. I also want to thank everybody. Firstly, I like to thank Mariana for holding space, particularly when it comes to tech, and also grounding our anxieties that something might explode or whatever. So I think that we managed jointly to figure out all the tech happening in the background. Thank you, Yosh, for inviting me and for having me in this space and this process. And it was super inspiring to think about all these different questions. And thank you, Antonella and Laura, for sharing and bringing a lot of optimism, like how things can play out differently. And when the war is over, we really have different models in our disposal that we can test in different environments and figure out what works, what needs to be evolved further, and so on. And I particularly want to thank Alla. When during preparations she came open and shared a lot of emotions and super important human level insights for me that was extremely valuable. So it was not just going in technical way through the process, but really bringing ourselves and as humans, as activists, and people who are coming with very different experiences. So for me, it was very empowering in this process. And I also want to thank Viktoriia for bringing this next level dimension of art and joy and everything. And during previous sessions, sometimes we had very difficult energy levels, and I think that you managed to convince something completely different to the space and bring certain lightness and spaciousness. And I really enjoy this cultural dimension and how we manage to have in same space both traditional and modern and all many different identities and beliefs and practices in one space. I really appreciate that. So thank you for bringing those angles, and thank you all for all people who are coming constantly, but also newcomers. And I hope you will find inspiring sessions that happened previously and that you can find on Feminist Kitchen website and YouTube. I totally agree with Yosh that it is completely important to have documentation of these feminist conversations and spaces. So yeah, I think we for sure are going to stay in this virtual community, but I also hope that we are going to see each other in person, hopefully in Ukraine. And yeah, take care of yourself, of your loved ones, be well and safe, and we are in touch.